Welcome back to Real Vision. I'm Ash Bennington. We're joined today by Sol Rashidi, C-suite data leader and author of the new best-selling book, Your AI Survival Guide, Scraped Knees, Bruised Elbows, and Lessons from Real-World AI Deployment. Sol, welcome to Real Vision.
Thank you so much, Ash. It's amazing to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. And boy, we couldn't have had better news flow leading into this with the Apple Intelligence announcement and the kerfuffle around it last night. Gosh, where do we begin? Obviously, huge topic. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's define AI in the context that you see it.
AI is kind of like having, it's so funny, just to back up. I'm having this conversation with my kids and I'm teaching them a little bit about prompt engineering. And my 6-year-old daughter, who's obsessed with axolotls right now, I'm like, you can create any type of axolotl you want. And so we would go into ChatGPT. I'd open up the Dolly prompt and I'd be like, okay, go ahead and type what kind of axolotl you want. And she went through a few exercises and generated images. And I'm like, well, you've got to tell if it's doing a good job or a bad job, just like mommy tells you when you're like getting good grades or not so good grades, and be specific in details. So she'll go through a second round and a third round and then a fourth round. And now every Saturday, as part of our weekend creative time, she gets 45 minutes just doing a variety of prompts, creating different axolotl images and colors. And she'll write, make it cuter, but this time add unicorn horns, things like that. So the way I explained to them when they asked, well, ultimately, what is AI? And I said, well, it's kind of like a super smart computer that can learn to a degree what we humans have learned. It's great at certain things and not so good at other things. Like it can't necessarily read emotion. It can't process emotional intelligence. There's certain cognitive capabilities it can't really quite do. But if it's something to be learned that's repetitive in nature, or something to be learned that has a finite set of responses, or something to be learned that we learn in school, like grammar and spelling, it can actually learn what we've learned up to a certain point. And it learns so in zeros and ones, because that's ultimately computer language. So a combination of software, data science, code, hardware, storage, compute, all of that is needed as a necessary foundation, just like you have food, just like you have a roof, just like you have mommy and daddy that take you to school and bring you back home. Those are foundational needs so that it could learn and grow as you are learning and growing. And then through our teachings, it learns with time and it gets better with time. So if you ask me what AI was, that's pretty much how I describe it to my kids. It's the ability for a computer to learn what we learn to a certain point. It doesn't necessarily past that point, but right now there are still limitations to it.
As a student of Charlie Munger, I love this idea of invert, always invert. What is not AI? Because if you listen to chief marketing officers in Silicon Valley right now, everything under the sun is AI. So what's not AI?
Yeah. And may he rest in peace. I was a big Munger fan. And I learned Munger's philosophies and principles through a dear friend of mine about a few years back. So there is a lot of snake oil. There is a lot of hype. There are things that we are putting the AI logo on it because it sells better. It gets you in the door and you can charge a premium for it. I unfortunately can't lie about that. And I think for people who aren't in the space or people who don't know what questions to ask, it's hard for them to make the distinction that ultimately makes the difference. So in our world, what's not AI is decision trees that have been scripted. If this, then that. If this, then that. If this, then that. So if X, it's Y. If it's Z, it's B. If it's A, choose C. Like those are specific script that you can code, that you can automate, that could essentially very finite in nature. There's no ability or need to think, to come up with ad hoc responses, to be able to understand contextual references. But the beauty of AI is it can understand context after it hits a certain level of maturity. So like if I were to as an example, type in wet feet. What's not AI is they don't know what wet feet means. What is AI is they would understand that, okay, am I standing in the rain and fundamentally my feet are wet, or am I getting wet feet before I'm about to get married? There's context, there's language. It can have a dialogue with you as a result. So like that would be a good one. Or another one is the word gray. Okay, are we talking about mood or are we talking about the color? What is not AI can't tell the difference. It's just a word with 4 letters. But if it is AI, it can understand context because it learns that there's fundamentally a distinction between gray as I'm in a gray mood versus gray as in the color.
So what was it that compelled you to write this book? Obviously, writing a book is an enormous undertaking. What did you feel needed to be communicated? What did you think wasn't being said in the marketplace of ideas?
It's interesting. I helped IBM launch Watson in 2011, and me and several leaders and several teammates, right? It takes an army to do something like that. And I've said it in the book, and I've said it a few times. I don't think IBM got the credit it deserves for launching something of that magnitude. And it's always hard, right? Being first to market, first to launch, because all arrows are pointing at your back and the exposure in the limelight is large. So people can be very, very critical. But when Watson went live, right, it was the first commercial grade AI application. It was B2B, but it was enterprise grade and it could be deployed at organizations of mass scale. And I've been doing it in 2011. It was me connecting with clients, establishing strategies, use cases, being the project lead on deployments. And so I've been doing deployments since Watson went live up until a few years ago. I should say a few years ago, up until about 11 months ago. And now I'm consulting and advising and helping clients do the deployments. But I've rolled up my sleeves. I've gotten into the weeds. I've gotten into the nitty gritty of things. And it's not things that you read about. There are so many nuances. And I think, everyone assumes if AI is going to work, the technology problem, but 70% of the reasons why AI applications or AI deployments don't work have nothing to do with technology. But unless you've done the deployment and unless you've gotten your hands dirty, everything is either rumor, hearsay, or regurgitation of something that's been read. And so when things sort of the hockey stick curve, the AI trend started going upwards, people were encouraging me to write. They're like, you've been in this space longer than we know. And I was like, well, let me just do some research because I'm not a writer. I've been so busy doing the work, I haven't written about it. And every AI book I saw out there was either from a researcher or an academic or someone claiming to be an AI expert. But they had, if you look at their LinkedIn profile, there were no signs of it for until a year and a half ago. And I'm like, you've got a bunch of kind of theorists and hocus pocus out there. I'm like, who's talking about what it actually takes to make it work? And there wasn't. So with the encouragement of a few peers of mine, friends of mine, I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about the real if there is, like real world deployments. And you had to have had a lot of failures to eke out a few successes, if that makes sense. It's kind of like the winery business. You've got to invest a ton of money to make a little. You've got to have gone through a lot of lessons learned, scraped knees, bruised elbows, failures, whoopsies, assumptions that didn't hold true. In order to be able to take things out of prototype and POC and into production. And so I think it's one of the reasons why most things stay in perpetual POC purgatory. They're just not familiar and no one's ever coached them or advised them of what to watch out for because everyone's trying it for the first time. So
yeah, I mean, to precisely that point, you've got, I think, something like 30 different applications in production, either today or have been in production. What have you learned from that experience?
Yeah, there's nearly 40 products or capabilities or applications or solutions, however you define it, that I have in production to this date. 2 have been retired, but I still have nearly 40. The first is 70% of the issues have nothing to do with the tech. The tech part, figuring that out, is actually the easiest. It's dealing with the individuals, agendas, right? There's just so much to dissect there. But the first is 70% has nothing to do with technology. The second is it's oftentimes, we talk about strategy and it's this magnanimous proposition on a deck. But I think what some people fail to acknowledge is your strategy, if you can't execute on your strategy, it's pure hallucination. Meaning delivery excellence and your ability to execute on it is just as important as the pretty powerful that you put together. And what people sometimes forget with AI is they may not have the fundamentals in infrastructure or data access or talent in place. So why pick a strategy and build this magnanimous profile of what you're going to do when you haven't even invested in the fundamentals in the last 2, 3, 5, 8 years? And so I always say that bend it, but don't break it. And most people pick this utopic view of where they're going to go without the reality of knowing what they can actually deliver. So I would say that's the second. The third is, a lot of people are going through the process of kicking the tires of, what use case should we choose? Well, they're picking a problem to be solved by AI versus just looking at the problem and figuring out how should we solve it. So sometimes it's best to choose a hammer and not a sledgehammer to solve the problem. AI is not the answer for everything. But yet some people just want to shoehorn it in. I would say that's another layer. And then the fourth layer that I could say is, when it comes to picking a use case, a lot of people choose business value as the primary operative to determine whether or not it should be chosen. And that's not a good way. And the reason is, whether it's within a business unit or in manufacturing or in supply chain or in procurement or in legal, there's a number of business functions and a number of business units. If they're plagued with a problem or if there's an issue that they want to solve, they all inherently have business value associated with them, whether it's business cost savings, so it's going to increase our EBITDA, whether it's top line growth, so this is going to increase our revenue. There's inherent business value in them. AI shouldn't be the tiebreaker. An individual shouldn't be the tiebreaker, understanding which use case should actually go into prototyping. And so a framework that I created at IBM after I've gone through a few deployments is based off of criticality and complexity. You have to also take a look at 5 factors associated with what makes the use case complicated, and then 5 factors associated with what makes the use case critical. Business value is one of the 10 measures. And so it's 10%. It's not 100%. And so that it goes into great detail of how to do the calculations and how to approach it in the book as well. So I think those I would say is there a portion of the 70%. There's others, of course.
So what is it other than adding value on the business side that goes into that calculation? What else is most critical in determining whether or not an application for AI will succeed or won't?
Your ability to actually deploy it. That's a huge determining factor, because if you're wanting to run a marathon and you choose January 1st, my goal for this year is to run a marathon. You're not going to run the marathon January 2nd or February 1st, right? It's a muscle that needs to be developed. So you're going to have a lot of individuals coming together and trying to align on this stuff. And then you're going to have to bring in internal talent. You're going to have to hire external talent. Most companies spend millions to be able to eke out a few $100,000. That's just the reality of it, because it's part of that learning curve. And so if you're going to invest that amount, you have to be very, very poignant and decisive about what it is about this use case that's worth enough the investment, because we're going to lose more than we're going to gain the first time around. And so when you take a look at criticality, it's not just about margin savings, productivity increases, capacity increases, or top line growth. The criticality of it is there an imminent threat in our industry? And we have to do this for relevancy and survivalship. Is the industry consolidating? Are we losing market share? Are we in dire straits that we have to do something desperate that's going to be game-changing in our industry, even though technically the industry in and of itself is stable? Are there new regulations that have come through that we are going to be fined or at risk of exposure if we don't do this? These are critical business decisions that you have to go through. And there's a list of the 5. And then business value, of course, is one of them. What are we going to get as a result of this? Right. So those things are very critical, but there's 4 other considerations to have, business value being one of them. But the biggest is the ability to actually deploy it. Is the data that you need to be able to train the model or to be able to run the solution? Is it in place? Is it of okay quality? And do you have access to it? Or do you have to go and find that one person in IT who has to grant you access to get the data and then send you a file over? That just won't work. So that's the first one. The second is the stakeholder, the business executive who's going to support this. Are they a good partner? I can't tell you how many times I fumbled because I had a really bad partner. And so I don't want to fumble again. And so I actually choose my stakeholders very carefully. Do they have a good reputation? Are they going to allot time on their calendar every 2 weeks to go through and understanding of the progress, where we're at, and the importance of being able to operationalize this use case once we're past prototyping? Who you actually partner with and the stakeholder you're serving is also very critical to the next. And then there's infrastructure. Do you even have the basics in place? And I'm not talking about hardware per se, but do you have a strong DevOps team so that when you go live with something like this, and AI products are live wires, they're not like software products. Software products are something that you essentially put into code, you push it into production, and it lives on forever. AI products don't live like that. You're only as good as your last piece of data. So it's like this live wire stream that consistently needs to flow through. Do you even have the DevOps mechanism, the CI/CD pipelines? And I know I'm getting all of the technical here, but it's a basic component of support and maintenance when something's in production. And if you don't have a strong process or a strong team, you won't be able to push it into production. So like there's just elements. So there's 10 key considerations to go through.
All right, so when we're talking about pushing to production, all of these underlying back-end factors, infrastructure, the mechanism of deployment, ongoing support via DevOps, it certainly seems, based on the news flow that we got yesterday out of Cupertino, that these folks out at Apple are going to be deploying this and deploying it at massive scale within the next 12 months or thereabout, not just on phones, but on tablets and on laptops and desktops as well. It's a tremendously complicated effort, as you point out, in terms of the actual deployment of something at scale like that. When you think about the potential applications of AI, essentially on every iPhone in America at a certain point in time, and then indeed every iPhone in the world, what do you think that world looks like? How is it different from where we are today? What opportunities does it present? And of course, what risks? A great deal of kerfuffle, as you might imagine, on Twitter. Some very critical comments from Elon Musk. I believe the spirit of which was essentially, if Apple does not figure out a way to segregate data in a way that they can credibly demonstrate to him, he is not going to allow Apple devices in any of his companies. It's quite a statement. And I know people are going to say, well, that's just Elon being Elon on Twitter. But this is a fear that I think a lot of people have about privacy, about data security. So there's a lot around this. Talk a little bit about how you think about these issues as they're going to continue to move to the forefront of our consciousness. AI has been relatively siloed over the last 12 months that I've been playing with ChatGPT or in the Google version. Talk a little bit about what this world is going to look like as we start to wrestle with these issues.
You want to unfuck your shit? This is live.
Yeah, that's being recorded. Hey, listen, if you want to unfuck your future, then come and join us in the Real Vision community. Incredible platform, amazing content, some of the smartest people in the world, and amazing tools. And guess what? It'll cost you nothing. Come to realvision.com. I'll see you there, and let's help you unfuck your future.
Like with any innovation, it's a double-edged sword. On a day-to-day basis, I go through a number of apps. And a lot of the stuff I do, even though I've automated it, even though I use a lot of AI, I still have to sometimes go between apps to be able to answer a question or be able to say, wait, let me check on my calendar. Hold on. That's actually in a tab in my notes. And then cross connect and then be able to respond via text the day I'm available for a talk or the day of it I'm available for a book signing.
Right.
So I'm excited by the fact that it's going to increase my professional productivity based on what they claim is coming down the line.
So just to be clear for folks who are following along, essentially what you're saying is we do live still in this very siloed world. AI is a thing out there that you use, but it's not directly interacting with our lives on a day-to-day basis.
It's not. And so right now it's like spot treating a shirt when it just needs to go through the wash.
Right.
It's at that point in time, it's a futile game, right? You're just going to continuously spot treat. Right now.
By the way, this is a great metaphor and I love it because it shows you both the opportunities and the risk, right? When you spot treat a shirt, if you get a little coffee on your shirt and you try to get it out, essentially that you're working on an area that's the size of a quarter. But when you throw it in the wash, you can shrink it, you can do whatever. I mean, this is really the sort of this globalized AI risk where you have the interconnectivity of all the data, all the applications, tremendous opportunity, but also, I think as Elon Musk has correctly pointed out, tremendous risk.
Agreed. And I know he's a character that people love to love and love to hate. He's not wrong in this one. Because if I spill my cup of coffee or if I put it on the counter too quickly, I get 7 splashes. I have to now clean all 7. It's laborious. It's like time. It just takes time, time that I don't have. I get frustrated. But each of those 7 is contained. And so if I choose not to clean 3 of the 7, it's a choice I have. So you have a choice. You have autonomy. But, on the flip side, it could be more time consuming. It's a bit more laborious in nature when you choose to clean all 7 because it's not integrated. It's not throwing it into the wash. Whereas if you throw it into wash, you're going to clean it all at once, whether you wanted to or not. That choice has been removed, right? So that's the analogy that I use. And so I would love for my apps to be integrated and that data to be integrated. It will save me a lot of time. But the flip side of that is, and this is why the double-edged sword is, it will provide me conveniences, but at a cost to my privacy. And so everyone has a different spectrum on convenience to invasion of privacy of where they lie, which is why it's not a clean answer. It's not black or white. It's 50 shades of gray, to be funny, because everyone's on a different spectrum. Now, specifically about Apple, I think for those of us who are in the industry, at first we laughed when they called AI Apple intelligence. Now, some of us are kind of pissed off. We're like, that's just really marketing. Like, that's what you wanted to do. That was too much in your face. I think the second aspect of it, the company that holds the most data on any individual is Apple. And years since they started, they have done nothing but institute the philosophy of our consumers come first. We respect their privacy. We respect their data. Nothing will be shared and nothing will be cross-referenced.
Right. And by the way, in fairness, it's been relatively easy for Apple to be the good guys in this equation. Why? Because, you spend a ton of money buying their devices. Lots of the services that you use online and SaaS applications, you do stuff in a browser, you do stuff on your phone. The way that gets monetized is via your data. Apple has had the luxury for decades now of having these incredibly fat margins on hardware and increasingly on data services that people were willing to pay for. So now you have this point in time where you get precisely to the challenges that you're talking about, where you have data privacy issues, and you have this incredibly powerful technology, this very rich set of data that people have been very comfortable giving Apple access to over the years. And now, I mean, it is just a huge open question.
It's not that people feel comfortable. They have no choice. If you want a phone that's as powerful or as beautiful or as elegant or as convenient as an iPhone, you have no choice. What's the alternative? And so by default, but you also felt more comfortable because part of their institutional principles and values were, we preserve and respect your privacy, and we will not show and share your information for any purposes until we want to create AI products on our own. And now we have to access this stuff. But the goal is they always had it. They never accessed it for gain. But this is the first implication where they're showing that they are going to access it for gain. Now, I've got to see some of these products because there is also a lot of hype. They've been talking about Siri for how long? And how many times have you said, hey, what's the direction to the nearest post office? And it shows me the direction to Costco. Like, completely unrelated. Siri is not the best, right? Their natural language processing technology, the ability to transcribe speech into what it actually heard, and then, set that in motion with directions. We all know we've gotten frustrated with Siris, and there's a ton of jokes, especially on Reddit and YouTube, about arguments between the individual and Siri. So I would have said, Apple, just improve Siri alone, and I think people would have been happy. But they took it like 100 steps further. And so to do the things that they're saying, I don't know how you can do it. And again, I didn't work on this, right? I'm not in the Apple safeguards, but either it's amazing marketing and hype, and they're really not integrating things, or if they're going to deliver on what they said, it is a violation of the institutional values and principles. Historically, they've said, we respect your data. We're not going to use your data for our gain whatsoever. And that's the crux of this right now. So it's a watch, we'll wait and see. But a lot of us are pretty pissed. We're on edge a little bit because Apple was supposed to be that one company.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate these waters with all of the opportunities and all of the threats. Talking of threats, another question that Elon Musk raised last night, or a series of questions, is about the question of essentially who's going to train the data set and what values is it going to reflect. Elon Musk retweeting a couple of tweets that I'll let folks go and read on their own, but they're these very provocative questions asking AI, would you prevent a global thermonuclear war if you had to do X, Y, and Z? And there are groups of things that are relatively, I should say, very, taboo. And the answer is, well, I'll let you evaluate them for yourself. But the question that he's asking fundamentally, it seems to me at least, is this question of, what values are going to be reflected in AI when they begin to play an incredibly important role in the way that the day-to-day mechanics of society unfold. I mean, these are real existential questions that we have just not faced as a society until right now, this moment.
Agreed. And I think there's 3 legs to that stool. Before OpenAI even came out with ChatGPT, and I don't know if most people know this, but the early versions, they had already spent $2 billion in 8 years in research. And Elon was one of the original investors. And then he pulled out. But he went in it because he said that, listen, we need to democratize artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence cannot just be in the hands of the tech companies. It's too dangerous. It's too powerful. So we need to put it in the hands of individuals. So he chose to invest, and they went down this path. OpenAI was supposed to be a non-for-profit company, and then they pivoted to being a for-profit company, and then Elon Musk filed suit. It went against the very, very reason why they all came together and invested. But over time, people became a little bit greedy, and they're like, oh, we can actually make money back on what we've invested. And so he pulled out, and he started his own thing. Then you've got Microsoft. They did what they did with OpenAI. A bit of a Trojan horse strategy there. And then now you've got Apple. And so Elon, I would assume, and again, it's not like he's my brother. And even though he's a character and a persona in the world that people love to criticize, but also love to love, he's not wrong in that. From the very get-go, he understands the power of artificial intelligence. And in the wrong hands and for the wrong purposes, there is an exchange of our personal privacy, period. Partially also because AI has been with the national defense for quite a bit of time. And partially because we've got to be able to move forward very thoughtfully and deliberately because Russia and China have invested in it, and they have for quite a bit of time. So our techniques and advancements need to be as mature as theirs. We can't fall behind in the war. But at the same time, we've got to be able to regulate it to a certain degree for any company that's there for commercial gain, because that has its own sidebar thing.
What I hear you saying when you say, we've got to figure this out and we've got to figure out a way to regulate this, is that the genie is out of the bottle. The toothpaste is never going back in the tube. This is the world that we live in now. We have to just address these questions.
And Elon has the influence, he has the reach, and he's got the proof points where he's the only person at this point in time who's willing to stick the neck out and bring some transparency to the greater global impact of you tech companies have a responsibility. Be responsible. And so I think that's why he's being so vocal about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
I think the second part of it is that as a society as a whole, we've got loud critics. There's no doubt about it. But it's mostly reserved for the people who live on the coasts. Unless it comes to political views, and then you've got folks in the middle, et cetera. But for the most part, for the majority of the population who has an iPhone, as an example, they're not going to question if what Apple is doing is ethical or not. Either they don't have the education, they don't know what they don't know, so they don't have the knowledge, or they're just happy with the fact that things just kind of work and they don't know what they've given up in exchange. And so now you're getting the point with critical mass with the majority where people are just going to be like, okay, I guess this is the new normal, without enforcing, without pushing any regulations or demands on here's the line and don't cross it, because they don't have the education. So I think with Elon having the discussions and trying to create transparency and being very vocal about it, and some may say his tactics are extreme. I think at this point in time, you kind of have to be extreme to wake people up. Plus the fact that we as a society tend to give up conveniences, our data just for conveniences. We tend to be a little bit lazier to question. With the third leg of, well, Apple hasn't done us wrong, so they won't do us wrong. They've created a persona. But I think now that they've redefined or trying to redefine AI's Apple intelligence, and they're really talking about integrating everything we do on a phone together, they're tapping into the very data that they said they'd never commercialize on or productize. I don't know how they're going to get away with that. If what they've claimed on the marketing stuff, again, it's just videos. We've all only seen videos, and I don't even have beta access. I don't know how they're going to do it without not using our data to train those capabilities. So I, to be honest with you, I'm just as curious as you are as how all this is going to unfold.
Yeah, I mean, from a technological standpoint, it seems like there could be an enormous challenge in figuring out how to essentially sterilize that data in a way that's segregated into secure enclaves. But to your point, how do you then train these language models on the data if you don't have access to it. It seems sort of like a catch-22. Since we're talking about Apple, since we're talking about X and other Musk companies, when you look at the landscape out there from a competitive perspective, who do you see as the potential winners and losers in this game in terms of companies?
You're going to hate this answer. I don't know at this point in time. I do know Moore's law is in full effect. We are at an age where things are at exponentially changing and growing, not incrementally. The pace of change is so fast, even for those of us in the field, we can't catch up. I can't keep my finger on the pulse. I have a list of 7 different feeds that tell me which AI companies were born today, which AI companies have died today. So the curve of evolution, that life cycle, it's alive and real. Companies that I thought would survive aren't surviving. Companies that I thought should be ahead aren't nearly as ahead. Companies that had no idea would climb ahead are now valued as the top 10 most valued companies in the world. So, and I know, again, it's not a preferred answer, but I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm going eyes wide in. I'm watching. I'm observing. I'm taking note. I'm looking at the trajectory of things. But the pace of change is so fast. The world we know today has exponentially changed tomorrow, whether we feel it or not. But in 3 months, we're going to feel the effect. By Christmas, we're definitely going to feel the effect. It's just if you're alive and paying attention and living in the now moment, it's an exhilarating and also a very, very exhausting and tiring feeling at the same time.
Well, that's actually a very interesting answer. What I hear you saying, in essence, is listen, everything's getting thrown into the blender, and it's just too soon to call right now. I mean, that in itself is a pretty interesting and provocative statement. This idea that essentially the old paradigms that we use to value things incrementally probably not going to be in place because of the degree and influence of the changes that are about to come down the pike. And you're, by the way, talking about 6 to 12 month time horizons. This is incredibly close. This isn't
I think any company, no matter who you are, if they are fundamentally providing the infrastructure, the hardware, they're not going to lose, because you can't do AI without a few key formulas. At this point in time, you can't do AI without people, which is a misnomer. Most people don't know that. You can't do AI without infrastructure, data storage, being able to handle GPUs, CPUs, workloads. So if you are in the cloud infrastructure business, you're not going to lose. You've now only just created, tethered a stronger dependency on you. But in terms of software, AI-based companies, who knows? But there's also, I think, another thing. It's even though we're talking about the pace of change, and I have my brain is split up into a few different worlds. There's the technologist in me that's watching and observing and understanding what's actually happening in the implications. There's the enterprise side of me because I work with Fortune 100s and 500s. And their pace of change isn't the innovators of the futurists of the world. It takes them a long time. So these legacy-based industries, companies like legal, insurance, the medical field, the payer, provider, patient advancements, but these are these big, giant icebergs that you need to move. So any companies that are dependent on, like the Oracles of the world, as an example, they're not the sexiest, but a lot of companies are still leveraging Oracle. They're still leveraging Teradata. You don't hear them. They're not the Apples or the Googles of the world anymore, the OpenAIs of the world, but you still have enterprises that are fundamentally dependent on them for infrastructure. They're going to be around too. They're not going away. So I always say it's like the 3-tier cake. The foundational layer, the infrastructure, the hardware, the non-sexy stuff. Once that's implanted into an enterprise or the masses are using it, you're solid. It's not going away. The middle layer, the integration layer, the middleware layer, that is rapidly evolving because with the proliferation of data, the needs and demands of performance are a lot greater. So there's smarter ways of doing things, of passing and exchanging information between the user interface, the app in which we see, and the foundation. That, I think, is going to continue to evolve. But then in terms of the application layer, the things that we use, the apps that we download, the programs that we have, on our computer, I can't keep up. That stuff is changing rapidly. New features, new functionality, different companies. So that middle layer and that top layer of the cake, those layers are changing very, very, very rapidly.
Well, it's interesting. 2 points. You talk about cloud compute, cloud services, cloud infrastructure. I think that probably makes a lot of sense to people, seems very intuitive. The interesting thing that you said to me, it was counterintuitive, was this idea that people still matter. That's really interesting. I'd love to hear you expand on that point, because I think a lot of people who look at this space casually think, well, this is really all about owning the data, having access to the SaaS platforms where you can do the cloud compute. Talk a little bit about people as a competitive advantage, because I don't think that's something that gets covered enough.
Well, I think there's 3 legs to that stool as well. The first is you can't do any AI model without data. And that data is being generated by us, whether it's our own personal data or our interactions with different systems and applications. We're generating stuff to train the models that eventually become into the AI solution. So we actually have a direct involvement and a direct influence on almost creating the food that feeds the algorithms and the models and the capabilities. There's that. The second is that we as humans fundamentally are doing the training. And so the example I give is parents and kids. In this world, we've got great parents and we've got some negligent parents. And as a great parent, your job is to provide a safe environment for your child, nurture, teach, expose, at a minimum, provide just the basics, right? So that child can thrive. But we have parents who are very negligent and they're mean and they don't provide the basics. And the same goes for the humans that are training the models. We've got some, and the majority are phenomenal researchers and inventors and futurists who are trying to create AI capabilities for the betterment of humanity. And then we've got some not so great caretakers like parents who are applying it and creating it for evil. And unfortunately, that's the stuff that we're fearing, because it's very much a possibility, just like having bad parents. And then I think the third is, as of now, right, as of June 2024, any AI application that's being deployed at an enterprise level, at a mid-size level, and I'm talking about purely within companies, there must always be a human in the loop, because it's not perfect, nor should it be perfect. I think that's unrealistic expectations. Sometimes I go into the conversation and they're like, well, it hallucinates and it comes out with fake data. And I'm like, listen, you can only be judgmental of this AI capability or of this model and the fact that it's not perfect if we've calculated our human error rate. And then let's do a side-by-side comparison of our human error rate with the machine error rate. And I've gone into situations where I'm like, our error rate as humans right now in the system on a day-to-day is 22%. The machine's error rate is 6%. So you're right. It's not perfect. It does hallucinate. But if I'm doing a side-by-side comparison, it is still double digits better than what we're doing today. So I think there's that. But second, because it's not perfect, you always need to have a human in the loop to be able to do sort of what I call the second pair of eyeballs, just to make sure if the results it's coming up with or what it's producing passes that sniff test, passes that gut test before anything is published or publicized. And this is especially needed and true if it's an external facing capability. But you've got some leniencies if it's an internal facing capability. Because if AI produces a result that is detrimental to the company but beneficial to the customer, there's a financial impact for you. But it could also produce a result that could lead a consumer down the wrong path, which also can be a PR nightmare for you. So I always say it must pass the sniff test. And this happened with me. It was December 18th at 5:30 a.m. I got a Google alert that there was an article in Google published with my name on it. And it was titled, "Unveiling the Man Behind the Name." That is Sol Rashidi. It was an H-page article on my husband. He never named him, but it talked about him and how he's been my greatest support and how he's been a phenomenal individual in my successes and career path. So I'm like, what on earth is this? So I go to tell my husband, I was like, Drew, and it's February. Did you have anything to do with this? And he's like, no, what on earth are you talking about? An 8-page article on it. It doesn't name you. It only names you as the husband that has helped me in my successes in my journey. And he reads it. He's like, well, clearly not. Like, they left out how charming and good looking I am. And like, we giggle and I'm like, I'm serious. Did you or did you not have something? And he's just like, no. Well, I put word out to my network. And by 2 p.m., I was on the phone with the CEO of that company that released that publication. I'm like, we're lucky. The article's kind of humorous and funny and neutral. But if this was a defamation on my career, we would have been having a different conversation. So in this case, I'm going to make margaritas out of lemons. And I want to know what the heck happened. Because this article is clearly bogus. It's talking about how adventurous my husband is. If I left him, he'd be on the couch for 7 days in a row. and how he takes long walks in the forest. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I have to drive us everywhere because he loses direction. You wouldn't even be able to find the forest. Like, he's got many, many wonderful qualities, but everything this article was talking about, I'm like, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. I'm like, so tell me what happened. And here's the story. They have a small marketing team, 4 to 5 individuals. An AI company approached them and said, we can increase your impressions by 68%. And we can increase your site traffic by over 100%. We're going to identify the top 100 keywords in your industry, and we're going to write articles about those keywords. And we are going to put them across part of our social media channel. And you should be able to see increases in impressions and site traffic. And so this small marketing team was like, we need all the muscle we can get. Why not?
Well,
the funny thing was, that was December 18th. They logged in December 18th. Sorry, that was December 17th. They log into their dashboard on December 18th, and sure enough, impressions have gone up. Site traffic has gone up. So according to the marketing KPIs, they met every goal that the company said they were. But then this happened. The 100 keywords that the AI company chose were not validated by the marketing team. And my name appeared as one of the 100. I don't even know how many other bogus keywords. Now, it was a business intelligence firm. So I've written a few articles, but I'm not a keyword under business intelligence. If anyone in the marketing team have a second pair of eyeballs that looked at that, they'll be remove this. It's not irrelevant. But they didn't. And then the company generated 7 articles created by generative AI capabilities per keyword. So then they flooded the market with 700 articles. And one of those articles was about my husband. But did that marketing team validate any of the articles to go, that's not relevant, that's not relevant, that's not relevant, to understand what was fake, what was just pure garbage, etc. So they just assumed the AI would do everything and it was going to be better than nothing. When they logged in, they're like, oh my gosh, we did our KPIs, this is powerful. But only to provide the market with just a bunch of crap and trash. So that's why I'm saying human must be in the loop. You still have to be in the process of looking at the information. You still need to provide common sense, critical thinking, say whatever it produced is right and good enough, or no, this is absolutely bogus. The context is incorrect. This isn't something that we could put in the marketplace. So as of June of 2024, you must have a human because there's enough errors where you can't afford not to look at it. And that's what I meant by you need to have a human.
It's almost like identifying an extraneous or spurious root in a math problem. You look at it and you go like, this just doesn't fit the equation. It doesn't make any sense. Gosh, we've covered just a tremendous amount of ground here today. Lots of talk about the opportunities as well as material risks, which I think in that story does a great job of sort of, framing up. Obviously, as you suggest, very early right now, hard to make firm determinations about the direction that things are going and who will be the winners, who will be the losers. But let me ask you this. What are you going to be looking at over the next 6 to 12 months to try and make some of those determinations? What are the things on your dashboard that you're going to be looking for? What are the things that our viewers and our listeners should be looking for and thinking about as this technology continues to steamroll forward?
I think one, overall, we as a society have increased our literacy just to become more knowledgeable about the implications, some of the choices that people and companies are making. So if we started with a 0 in November 2022, and our literacy has gone up to 4% or whatever that number may be by the end of 2020, where are we now? Is our knowledge base and literacy of AI and its capabilities, that double-edged sword, has it increased? Because we have to be educated. And it can't be restricted to people who do podcasts or write books or work in enterprises or have access to management consultants. It just needs to be democratized, this information. So that's one thing I'm going to think. Are we educating people enough? I think the second is which companies are going to do the right thing and not do it just for commercial gain, just because we can get bigger. It's just not right. And so I think for me, understanding which ones have a moral compass and they're abiding by it is something that I'm going to be watching out for. And then third, I think the pace of change and movement amongst hardware, software, the middleware, and then that user interface, and seeing if there are any companies that are rooted and grounded, and if they're going to be around. So longevity, I would say those.
Yeah. By the way, I should say, as we say this, I'm looking right now here at Apple stock, looks like up about 10% year to date, new high over 3 trillion in market cap. I'm just eyeballing the charts here, but that's what the numbers look like to me. So incredible conversation today. Final thoughts, key takeaways that you'd like to leave our listeners and our viewers with.
And not just with AI, right? But whatever the buzzword of, or soup du jour of the 2-year, 3-year thing is going to be. One, I don't think AI is going to be like Web 3.0 or metaverse. It's not going to be a trend. It is here to stay. We may not be referencing it as AI. We may not call it AI. We may not know it's AI, but it is going to be embedded in our day-to-day. And when it's done right, we won't even know it's happening. My perfect example is, has anyone ever noticed that sometimes there's an orange dot that appears on your phone or on your Apple Watch? That orange dot means that one of your apps is listening. And it's listening to your actions and interactions.
And the green dot means it's watching and listening.
It's not by accident that you could be talking about something, and before you know it, when you walk in, you get a recommendation for the very thing that you're talking about. Almost everyone I talk to didn't even know. And that's a sad reality. And part of it is anytime you download a new app, when you click terms and conditions, we don't read it. We just click it because we just want to use the app. But you're giving up a piece, and you're giving them the right to do what they want. And that's where that orange dot and that's where that green dot appears. So you have the ability to disable it, but you have to actively and proactively go disable it. If the default is you're giving them permission to go ahead and access. So
we also have to be trusting that Apple and Google and the OS providers are getting their security models right, getting the containerization right, so that you can segregate those data, making sure that the apps in the store are abiding by the policies. It is just a whole stack of technical challenges.
100%, but we just take it for granted and we just assume they must be doing the right thing. Right? So I think everyone should become knowledgeable or at least informed on what some of these things mean. Second, know that you do pay a price for convenience, and it is your data. 3, there is an opportunity for people to be vocal, just like with GDPR, which is the legislation passed around consumer data, consumer use. Yeah, and it spilled over right to the US, and then we got CCPA in California, COPA, different regions. But the goal was to protect consumer data. And if we didn't want our data to be used, we had the option of opting out. So I think there is an opportunity for something similar in the AI space if enough people and cohorts and organizations speak up. So I think
this gets into what you said earlier, which is the number of people who are going to opt out when the convenience and when someone the social pressure when someone says you can't find the restaurant I just shared it with you. I don't know where you got disabled on your phone. Turn it on so you can find where we're having dinner tonight. We're halfway through appetizers. I don't know where you are. Right.
That's exactly. So AI it's not a trend. It is here to stay, but we may hit fatigue with the term. So the term may not be as overly used, but it's going to be embedded and we won't even know when it's happening to us. The second would be, it's just to know that for conveniences, there's always an exchange. Don't be deaf to that, if that makes sense. And then third, pick and choose where you want conveniences. Be smart about productivity. Be smart about, bandwidth and capacity. As of right now, there needs to be human in the loop. Use good judgment, verify everything, whether you work for an organization or you're a personal individual and you download an app that's just really fun. I would say those would be the 12 things. I wouldn't get into the maths involved, especially for the non-technologists or those who don't work in tech companies or interact with technology. It's too much to keep track of right now. Just think about the moral implications and that double-edged sword in that we're all given a choice because you're in that position.
Sol Rashidi, author of the new best-selling book, Your AI Survival Guide, Scraped Knees, Bruised Elbows, and Lessons from Real-World AI Deployments. I hope as we continue to negotiate these questions and challenges, you'll come back and join us again and give us your insights.
Thank you. Thank you, Asher.
Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for watching.
We hope you enjoyed the video. At Real Vision, we help you understand the complex world of finance, business, and the global economy with in-depth analysis from real experts. Join the revolution at realvision.com.